My name is Margaret Lane, and I am 67 years old. Until last spring, I believed I understood the quiet rhythm of my life. I lived alone in the house my late husband, Charles, and I bought 42 years ago, a modest two-story place framed by maple trees and memories too tender for me to disturb. My days were simple: tending the garden, volunteering at the library, and hosting Sunday dinners for my son, my daughter, and their growing families. I had always been the calm center of our family's spinning universe, or so I thought. I never imagined that ordinary routine could hide something darker beneath it, like a hairline crack in a perfect teacup. But looking back, the signs were there. My daughter's clipped tone when she asked about my savings for future planning, my son's sudden interest in whether I still kept the house in my name, and the way their spouses whispered when they thought I couldn't hear them. There was a new tension in the air, one I couldn't quite interpret. I reasoned it away. Families change, people get tired, money gets tight. Still, unease lingered. It was particularly strong on the morning my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up, but habit overtook hesitation. "Mrs. Lane," a young woman said. "I'm calling from Fidelity Union Bank to confirm the meeting scheduled for next week regarding the home equity loan application." For a moment, I thought she had confused me with someone else. "I'm sorry," I said. "I haven't applied for any loan." There was a brief shuffle of papers. "The application lists your house as collateral. The meeting was requested by," she paused, "your family." The quiet crack in the teacup widened. I ended the call politely and sat in silence at my kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a cup of cooling tea. I felt an unfamiliar heaviness settling over me. Not fear exactly, but a recognition that something had shifted. The air in the room seemed denser, the sunlight harsher. For the first time in my life, I found myself wondering whether my own children saw me as a person or an asset. But I didn't act right away. Not out of denial. No, I've lived long enough to sense when danger approaches, but because age has taught me the power of patience. A problem observed quietly reveals its own shape. That Sunday, as I cooked dinner and listened to the soft hum of onions caramelizing in the pan, I decided I would wait. I would give them the room to speak, to reveal themselves. Truth, after all, has a habit of rising to the surface, sometimes with unpleasant timing. And it did. At the next family dinner, the house felt different. Conversations were too polite, movements too choreographed. When I stepped out to fetch a jar of pickles from the cellar, I returned to find my daughter's voice drifting from the dining room, sharp, irritated, and unaware I was listening. She needs to understand her place in the family. She doesn't need that house anymore. And it's irresponsible to keep all that equity locked up when we could be investing it. My son muttered something in agreement. My heart clenched, not from anger, but from clarity. I finally understood the shape of the shadow creeping through my quiet life. But they didn't know what I had already learned. And they certainly didn't know what I was prepared to do. When I stepped back into the room, I smiled, placed the jar on the table, and served dinner as if nothing were amiss. Calm, composed, unshaken on the surface. Inside me, however, a new resolve settled in. A resolve forged not from revenge, but from justice. They thought they were planning my future. They had no idea I had already begun planning theirs. And the first person I would speak to was the bank manager. I didn't confront them that night. Instead, I watched them eat, laugh nervously, and avoid my eyes. I watched the way my daughter's husband kept checking his phone, as though waiting for confirmation of a plot in motion. I watched my son's wife offer exaggerated smiles that didn't reach her eyes. It was almost surreal, my own family, sitting at my table, plotting a betrayal with the casual indifference of people discussing the weather. But the true shock came 3 days later. I received another call, this time from a different representative at the bank. He sounded apologetic, even embarrassed. "Mrs. Lane, I regret to inform you that the application has moved forward to the conditional approval stage." The documents submitted were extensive. I asked him, with measured calmness, what documents he meant. He listed them slowly: my house deed, my tax records, my financial portfolio summaries, even Charles's old pension paperwork, things that had been stored in a locked file cabinet in my bedroom. They would have needed access to my bedroom, my desk, my locked drawers. My hands trembled. I forced my voice to remain steady. "Can you tell me who signed the application?" "That's the confusing part, ma'am. The signature is, well, it looks like yours." But he hesitated. "It appears inconsistent. A forged signature. My own children had forged my name." After the call, I sat in my armchair in the living room, letting the quiet settle over me like dust. I wasn't crying. I didn't even feel anger yet. What I felt was something deeper. A cold, hollow ache that comes when the foundations of your world crack beneath you. I thought of Charles, of how proud he'd been of the home we built, of how many nights we sat by that very window planning our future, of how fiercely he would have protected me, even from our own children. I whispered into the room, "Charles, I'm sorry we let them grow up thinking this is acceptable." But sorrow only lasted so long, because just as betrayal breaks something inside you, it also ignites something. And for the first time since my husband's passing, I felt a surge of strength. Not vengeful rage, no. Something calmer, sharper. Something far more dangerous to those who had underestimated me. That evening, I cooked myself a quiet dinner. I set the table for one. I played the classical music Charles used to hum along to. In that moment, I made a decision. If my children believed I was old, frail, and easily manipulated, then I would let them believe it. Until, of course, the moment came for them to learn otherwise. A plan formed slowly, like mist taking shape, methodical, ethical, and grounded in truth. A plan that involved documentation, timelines, and precise questions that would unravel their excuses like threads in a worn-out sweater. But before any of that, I needed one thing: the full picture. And the only person who could give it to me was the bank manager I would meet the next morning. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood something profound. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone believes is harmless. When dawn finally broke, I rose with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was time to learn every detail of my children's deceit. And, if necessary, show them exactly what their place in the family truly was. When I arrived at the bank that morning, I was prepared. Not emotional, prepared. A calm heart and a clear mind are sharper than any weapon. As I took a seat across from Mr. Kessler, the branch manager, I felt the familiar echo of the woman I had once been: organized, competent, unflappable. Before retirement, I spent 35 years working as an administrative coordinator for a legal firm. Years of indexing documents and tracking details had carved certain habits into my bones. My children must have forgotten that. Mr. Kessler, a man in his early 40s with gentle eyes and an apologetic posture, greeted me politely. "Mrs. Lane, I'm so sorry for the confusion. I want to help you sort this out." "I appreciate that," I said, folding my hands in my lap. "But first, I need to understand how my personal documents were submitted without my knowledge." He looked uncomfortable, but retrieved a manila folder. Inside were photocopies of my deed, tax returns, pension statements, and bank information. Seeing my life reduced to paperwork didn't hurt. What hurt was the realization of who had gone through my private belongings. My son's handwriting was unmistakable. Even after all these years, I recognized the way he formed his capital G's, a remnant of the penmanship class he took in the 3rd grade. My daughter's signature appeared on a supplementary form requesting authority to manage familial assets for elder care purposes. Elder care. They had framed me as an incapacitated senior, a woman too vulnerable to manage her own life. The echo of their childhood filled my ears. My son crying after scraping his knee, my daughter asking me to braid her hair before school. I had always tried to give them stability, safety, love. So how had they grown into adults who could justify this? That question lingered like a whisper in the back of my mind as I flipped through each document. I thought back to the past few years. My son had been struggling with a series of business failures, small ventures that never became profitable. He had borrowed money from friends, then from me, then from more questionable sources. Each time, I helped him just enough to soften the blow, never wanting him to drown. My daughter, on the other hand, hid her problems behind a polished exterior. She and her husband lived in a large suburban home, drove new cars, and took vacations they couldn't possibly afford. I suspected, quietly, that they were drowning in debt. But they always brushed off concerns with prideful smiles. And in the quiet corner of my memory, a conversation replayed, a conversation from 2 years earlier when my daughter said, "Mom, you and Dad were too cautious. Sometimes you have to use what you have to build more." I had laughed at the time, thinking it was youthful ambition. Now I understood. They weren't looking to help me. They were looking to save themselves. Yet understanding their motives didn't soften the sting of their actions. If anything, it strengthened my resolve. People often justify terrible choices when they feel cornered. But desperation does not excuse deceit. Mr. Kessler met my gaze. Mrs. Lane, if you want to halt the application and flag it for fraud, I can initiate the process immediately. But you should be aware, it will require formal statements. Possibly even legal action. I nodded slowly. I'm not opposed to legal action, I said. But first, I need copies of everything they submitted. He hesitated, then slid the folder toward me. I can give you these. They're yours by right. I placed the folder in my bag, feeling its weight settle like a silent promise. This was no longer just about a loan. It was about truth. About boundaries. About restoring the respect that had somehow eroded over time. As I thanked Mr. Kessler and turned to leave, he asked quietly, "Do you want me to notify your family that you're aware?" I paused at the door. "No," I said. "Not yet." Because before confronting them, I intended to know everything. Who pushed for what? Who forged what? And how long they had been planning it. I stepped out into the crisp morning air, my steps steady, my heart calm. I may have been older, but I was not powerless. And soon, they would learn that for themselves. Especially when I discovered the second loan application. The first thing I did after leaving the bank was drive straight to the library where I volunteered. Not for comfort, though books have always calmed me, but because the quiet corner office where I managed inventory reports had something I needed: a scanner, a printer, and privacy. I sat at the small wooden desk and spread out the documents. The forged signature stood out starkly, like a bruise on clean skin. I scanned everything, labeling each file meticulously. Loan application, supporting documents, forged signature, spousal signatures, and so on. My plan was simple: document everything. Information is leverage, but organized information is power. The more I studied the papers, the more inconsistencies I found. Differences in pen pressure, mismatched dates, misspelled words my children would never misspell. They hadn't even tried to cover their tracks properly. Sloppy. Careless. Desperate. I took notes, writing down small observations. My daughter had listed herself as my primary caregiver. A blatant lie. My son had submitted a false statement claiming I had mobility issues. The fabrications piled up like debris in a neglected yard. But the real revelation came when I examined the final page of the application packet. Right there, in faint imprint marks, were the words "Second Property Inquiry." My breath caught. Second property? I only owned one home. Digging deeper, I found a supplementary form they hadn't intended for me to see, mistakenly included in the scanned paperwork. It referenced a planned investment property they intended to purchase, using the loan against my home as the down payment. My children weren't just trying to extract money. They were trying to gamble my future for their failing ventures. A cold determination settled over me. It was time to gather more than bank documents. I needed the full picture of their financial behavior. That afternoon, I called Linda, my close friend of 30 years and a retired accountant. I asked her to lunch and brought the folder with me. She flipped through the pages, clucking her tongue. "This isn't just reckless, Margaret. This is fraud with intent. They're building a financial structure on your back. If it collapses, you'll be the one buried." I nodded, the truth heavy but clarifying. "Help me understand exactly what I'm looking at." For the next hour, Linda explained everything in calm, precise terms. She highlighted the risks, the liabilities, the ways my children had positioned me as the responsible party for their debts. When we were done, she said gently, "What are you going to do?" I sipped my tea slowly. "I'm going to gather more proof," I said. "Then I'm going to confront them. Calmly, clearly, with everything documented." Linda exhaled. "Just promise me one thing. Don't meet with them alone." "I won't," I said. But in truth, I wasn't sure yet. That evening, I began documenting everything. Dates, times, call logs, their recent behavior, even the odd moments when I noticed drawers slightly ajar. I moved like a woman sorting puzzle pieces. Slow, methodical, patient. By nightfall, I had a binder full of organized evidence. And then, just past 10 p.m., my son sent a group text. "Family meeting at my house Sunday. Mandatory. Lots to discuss." Mandatory. I stared at the word until its meaning crystallized. They weren't delaying their plan. They were accelerating it. Maybe they were afraid the bank would contact me. Maybe their debts were pressing in. Maybe they believed the lie that age makes a person blind. But I saw everything. And Sunday would be the day they learned that the woman they thought they could manipulate had sharper eyes than they ever imagined. What I didn't know yet was what they intended to spring on me at that meeting. or that I would not be walking in alone. Sunday arrived with the brittle calm of a storm waiting to break. I dressed simply, black slacks, a soft gray sweater, and my late husband's wristwatch. I packed my binder into my tote bag and stepped out onto the porch, feeling the crisp air settle against my skin. There was no dread in my chest, only clarity. Before driving to my son's house, I stopped by the bank. This time, not to speak with Mr. Kessler, but because he had agreed to meet me there briefly before his shift. He handed me additional copies of the documents and confirmed, with a grave expression, that a second loan application had indeed been initiated, an even larger one. My stomach tightened. He said quietly, "Mrs. Lane, if they had succeeded, you could have lost your home." I nodded. "I understand. Thank you." I left with everything I needed. When I arrived at my son's house, the family was already gathered. My daughter's car, my son's truck, the SUV belonging to my daughter-in-law, they lined the driveway like monuments to financial overreach. I stepped inside to an atmosphere thick with tension. My daughter sat on the sofa, her arms folded. My son hovered near the kitchen doorway. Their spouses avoided my eyes. "Mom," my daughter began, forcing a smile. "Good. You're here. We've been discussing your place in the family," my son finished. "We need to talk about the future." The words felt rehearsed. I took a slow breath. "I agree. We do need to talk about the future." My daughter-in-law shifted nervously. My son's wife looked away. My son gestured stiffly to a chair. "Sit down, Mom. We've made a plan that'll benefit all of us." I remained standing. "Before you tell me your plan," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I'd like to show you something." My daughter frowned. "This isn't the time for." I opened my tote bag and placed the binder on the table. 8 eyes followed the motion. "What's that?" my son asked. "Documentation," I said. "Of every form, every signature, every lie submitted to the bank using my name." The air snapped with sudden tension. I opened the binder to the first page. My daughter's face drained of color. My son went rigid. Their spouses exchanged quick, terrified glances. "This is a copy of the loan application you filed without my knowledge," I said, tapping the page. "This is the forged signature. These are the false statements claiming I'm incapacitated. And here," I flipped another page, "is your plan to use the equity from my home as a down payment on an investment property." My son stepped forward. "Mom, it's not what you think." I raised a hand, silencing him. "I know exactly what it is." They looked at one another, searching for a united defense. My daughter tried first. "We were trying to help you. You shouldn't be living alone anymore. We thought." "No," I said quietly. "What you thought is that I wasn't paying attention." My son-in-law cleared his throat. "You have to understand, Margaret, this would have benefited everyone." "Except me," I said. My daughter's voice sharpened. "You're overreacting." I turned a page in the binder. "Am I also overreacting to the second loan application you submitted?" Silence. My son's face paled. My daughter's mouth fell open. "You weren't supposed," she began, then stopped. "Supposed to find out?" I asked gently. The room felt suspended in air, every breath held, every eye fixed on me. "I'm not angry," I continued, "but I am disappointed, and I will not let you gamble with my home, my future, or your father's legacy." My son's voice cracked. "We're drowning, Mom. We needed." I held his gaze. "And you thought sinking me would save you?" He rubbed his face with both hands, defeated. I closed the binder softly. "I came here to listen," I said. "So please, explain why you believed I owed you my house." Their excuses followed, tumbling over each other. Fear, debt, pressure, misguided justification. But nothing they said changed the truth. And nothing they said prepared them for what I would reveal next. I took out one final paper, an official notice from the bank. A notice canceling their applications. My children stared at it, stunned. Then my daughter whispered, "What did you do?" I met her eyes with calm certainty. "I had a meeting with the bank manager." Her face went slack. And then I added, "And he wasn't the only person I spoke to." Because the next revelation would shake the room far more than the first. "You talked to someone else?" my son asked, his voice tight. "Yes," I said. "I met with a legal advisor. A friend. Someone who walked me through the implications of everything you submitted in my name." My daughter blanched. "Mom, you didn't." "I didn't press charges," I replied. "Not yet. Not yet." The words hung in the air like a held breath. Their spouses exchanged horrified glances. My daughter's fingers trembled where they rested on the arm of the sofa. My son paced in tight circles, agitation radiating off him. I want to understand something, I said. Why didn't either of you simply come to me? Why lies? Why forgery? My son stopped pacing. He sank into a chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. We didn't want to worry you, he said. I gave him a level look. So you forged my signature instead. His shoulders sagged. My daughter spoke next, her tone brittle. We were trying to fix things before they got worse. Things are worse, I said. Because you chose deceit over honesty. Her jaw tightened. I saw the familiar defensiveness. The same stance she took as a teenager when caught sneaking out after curfew. But now the stakes were far higher. You don't understand, she hissed. We're drowning in debt. You're sitting on a house worth $400,000, living alone, refusing to downsize or consider assisted living. You're being selfish. Then one evening, 6 weeks after everything unraveled, my daughter invited me to dinner, just the two of us. We sat at her kitchen table, quiet for a moment before she said, Mom, thank you for not giving up on us. I smiled softly. Love is not measured by absence of mistakes. It's measured by what we choose to do after them. She reached across the table and took my hand. I promise I will never put you in that position again. And for the first time in months, I believed her. Consequences had done their work. Now healing could begin. But I still had one final part to share, a reflection meant not just for my children, but for anyone listening. In the months that followed, life returned to a gentler rhythm. My home remained mine, quiet, safe, filled with memories that didn't tremble at the thought of loss. The maple trees outside my window swayed with familiar comfort. The old house creaked in its usual ways, like an aging friend stretching its joints. My children visited regularly now, not out of obligation, but with sincerity. They came with honest updates, not requests. They came with curiosity, not expectations. And most importantly, they came with humility, an ingredient missing for far too long. We rebuilt trust slowly, like tending a fragile garden, watering it with honesty, pulling out weeds of resentment, allowing time to strengthen the roots. Eventually, the wound became a scar, permanent but no longer painful. I often sit in my armchair at dusk, reflecting on how easily families can drift into dangerous territory without realizing it. People make desperate choices when they believe they are alone with their fears. But the truth is this: you are never too old to reclaim your voice. You are never too weak to defend your dignity. And you are never obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. What my children saw as vulnerability was, in fact, strength. The strength to stay calm, gather truth, and confront wrongdoing without cruelty. Ethical revenge is not about destroying someone. It's about revealing the truth so clearly that they cannot escape its reflection. And redemption, true redemption, comes when people choose accountability over denial. My story isn't one of anger. It's one of clarity, boundaries, and resilience. Age does not erase a person's power. It deepens it. And if you ever find yourself underestimated, remember, still waters are not weak. They're deep, and they can carve through stone. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever stood against betrayal or fought to protect your future, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stories like ours deserve to be told.